Welcome to Biohacking Beauty, the podcast where we simplify the science of youthful aging and help you take control of your skin from the inside out and from the outside in. I'm your host, Amitai Eshel, CEO of Young Goose, your go-to biohacking longevity skincare company. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been hiding in plain sight when it comes to aging, skin health, and even chronic pain. We're joined by Ashley Black, award-winning entrepreneur, two-time best-selling author, and the creator of the revolutionary FasciaBlaster. After overcoming childhood arthritis and a near-death experience, Ashley dedicated her life to helping millions transform their bodies through fascia regeneration, and in doing so, discovered some powerful connections to longevity and even skin rejuvenation. In this episode, you'll learn what fascia really is and why it's key to both pain relief and skin health. You'll learn how you can regenerate fascia and restore it to its native state at any age, and why stimulating fascia boosts collagen remodeling, increases capillary blood flow, and even triggers stem cell release in the skin. If you're looking for a science backed way to take your skincare to the next level and want to understand the structural tissue behind smoother skin and reduced cellulite, this is the episode you don't want to miss. And if you like what you're hearing here and you want to give Young Goose products a shot, make sure to visit younggoose.com and use code podcast10 for 10% off. Let's jump in. All right, Ashley, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for people to hear our conversations on air.
We've had wonderful conversations in
I
private,
know. I know. And I can't wait for us to get to some of the deeper things that we normally talk about. But I want to start with starting very simply.
Okay.
Let's talk about what is fascia and why do so few people understand its role in the body.
Well, I can give you the very short answer. So what it is it's basically everything that a cell is not. Mm-hmm. So I always describe it like when we picture the human body and picture fascia, everyone talks about it being sheets of collagen, or, it surrounds the cells. But I just picture like the entire human body as if it were Jello. And then you stick your brains, all the cells, the blood, everything in this Jello, and they all sort of blend together. Mm-hmm. That is my more sort of straightforward understanding of what it is physically in the body. But the interesting part is what it does in the body. And then as far as why don't people know about it, I mean, it's been suppressed. It's very powerful, this system of the body. I consider it a spiritual system of the body, almost an antenna in the body to God or the matrix, whatever you believe, the quantum universe. But it is the only thing in our body that is fractal and functions in a quantum way. Our brain doesn't do that. Our organs don't do that. So, you're picturing this sort of liquid, viscous, crystal-lined, fractal quantum thing we have going on in our body. Of course, no one wants you to know how to tap into the power of that.
And I think also, giving people the benefit of the doubt, it's significantly less structured, no pun intended, and rigid than talking about an acute injury or anything like that. It is so much more of a log of your body's journey rather than a a confined thing that you can isolate and address on its own, etc.
Right. I mean, I think so much happened if we just even think about the medical community, and I'm going to throw beauty into that. Mm-hmm. Basically at the turn of the century, 2 centuries ago, we we stopped looking at things like energy and sound and other modalities like that. And we moved into, taking doctors and giving them specialties, and kind of going in the direction of pills and surgery. But even that very first class, like I love talking to medical doctors about this. They're like, in order for people to really understand fascia, we have to change the first class that everyone takes, which is
Mm.
anatomy and physiology. Because with anatomy, we have a very incomplete picture of what anatomy is. And physiology, I mean, fascia is so much a part of movement and movement of the whole, right? But the understanding of fascia in terms of the anatomy, I know for me, the first time I went to a dissection class and they, cut the body open, this is almost 25 years ago. They're like, we're just going to remove the fascia. It was the first time I'd heard the word. And I remember like, WTF, you're going to remove the fascia. That's the whole body. And so I
Mhm.
just intuitively knew like, there's no way this is packing material, and it
Yeah.
started a fascination for me for really learning the anatomy. And over the 25 years, what I really believe is that it's an as above, so below. You know how they talk about how the universe is in us. I believe that the fascia is where that is housed in the human body. And even down to the mitochondria, because I'm going to go down to the plank, the quark, like let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
But mitochondria is floating in a sea of fascia. And in anatomy, when we didn't know what something was, we just called it
Mhm.
matter. So everything that's dark matter, white matter, arachnoid matter, all of our meninges that are just some kind
Mhm.
of matter, this is where we went and missed it, right? And you also
Yeah.
can't study fascia just in an ankle. Like we've done ultrasounds where we can say, oh, look, we regenerated this soft tissue, which is another code word for fascia.
Mhm.
Um, but in isolation, you're not really getting the whole picture because
Yeah.
it functions in a quantum way. We're talking
Yeah.
more quantum, light, energy, and our medical system just doesn't even, we're barely scratching the surface right now.
I agree. I agree with the premise, and I would even add that um, fascia at the end of the day, if someone wanted to really boil it down, it is the bridge for relationships in the body. Like I think we have a lot
Right.
of those. Like temperature is a bridge for relationships in the body. Maybe different hormones. Your DNA probably. Someone would argue it's a bridge for different
Yeah,
relationships
chemical
between.
reactions,
Exactly. But the
neurons
fascia is.
communicating. They
Yeah.
all do this through the fascia. It's almost like
Exactly.
if you think about it like communication, there's cars and there's the freeways, and so everybody's like, oh, the cars, oh, this synapsis or chemical reaction, oh, the mitochondria, Krebs cycle, whatever. But what about the freeway? If the freeway is
I,
blocked,
I
we're
would
not
even
going
I would even call it the ways, of the body.
to
Or
right.
now you have other applications. But how would you explain someone that has never heard of the internet? How would you explain to them the relationship between cars relaying information to one another
Yes,
and drivers then making decisions
that's
on
right.
where to go, or that system recommending
That's
where
right.
you should go? um so that's a very difficult relationship. so
Yeah,
so
believe you me. I mean, I talk about it every day on my social channels, and I've been on very big stages in the medical community. And even when people have a very good core understanding, it's just such a big concept. And I always say the highest form of learning is unlearning. And
Mhm.
that's what we're asking people to do is unlearn, flip it on its head and relearn. So I think that's a
Yeah.
little bit of like, you know, where
Yeah. Yeah.
people just kind of get stunted. But one thing I think that always really gets people to go, whoa, this is huge, is When we are anesthetized, our fascia literally goes from being fractal, it looks like a honeycomb, like in vivo. And then when we're anesthetized, it goes flat and looks like cracks, you know? So the people in the fascia world are really getting re energized and excited about the old studies about
Mm,
consciousness.
mm,
And I really feel like our spiritual, our orthopedic, even our plastic surgeon, our beauty for sure, like all of these are starting to converge and go, what about that fascia? Like
yeah,
how
yeah,
can we harness this power for our specialty? And
yeah.
I'm here for it.
I love it. So you mentioned different forms, and you mentioned beauty.
Hmm.
Can you explain how fascia connects directly to skin structure and appearance?
Well, I mean, I think even I had an understanding that fascia was surrounding the cells of the skin, all
Hmm.
literally all the way from the surface. Like we're looking at some fascia right now.
Hmm.
But my new research has led me to where it's not just around the cells, but it's actually inside the cells. You know,
Hmm.
so when we think about how does it connects to everything. It's one three-dimensional web, literally from the surface of the skin all the way down to the bone.
Hmm.
And we call it all kinds of different things, but you can just pull up a picture of histology of skin. And I train estheticians at my academy, and they're just like, whoa, we've never even heard this. So, even in the
Hmm.
skin, when we talk about the surface of the skin, all around and in those cells, down to the basement membrane, where then we start to really meet, I'm just going to call it fasciarama, you know, and then we start getting into the myofascial tissue and, you know, it's so interconnected with our blood system. You know,
Hmm.
basically every single thing that feeds the skin in any type of way and supports the skin in any type of way is intricately linked to the fascia, if it's not totally the fascia.
Yeah,
So it's dramatic for beauty.
I agree. There's a new study now showing that fat tissue under the skin contributes stem cells and exosomes, obviously, and growth factors to the skin, and
Oh, I want to
that
get into that.
yeah, and the correspondence is done through the fascia or through
Absolutely. Absolutely.
interstitial tissue. But I just want to remark, and that's why off air we mentioned a lot of kind of like that there are detractors. There are people who are, who they have, they have a in my eyes like a wrong view of the world, of the beauty medical world, whatever. And we have gotten a lot of people that are upset that we really try to persuade people not to do wave based um, contraction devices like
Hmm.
Morpheus 8, radio frequency microneedling, or high frequency ultrasound like Ulthera or Softwave. And a lot of what the language that we use is that you are, whether you admit it or not, what you are trying to do is contraction of the fascia,
Hmm.
but within that you are harming the fascia in a very, in a, not that it's irreversible. I would love to talk about like how we reverse damage, but in a way where it makes it so much harder for your body to function and to heal later on. um and I think,
Well, I think you just have to know what you're messing with here. You
yeah,
know, at the end of the day, there's a really interesting way. It'll take me about a minute to say it
yeah.
all. But what I believe, and I don't have any proof of this, okay, by the way, I do have a lot of science based, you know, evidence for things. But what I think with fascia, you know, it is literally the first cells of life. When the fascia of the sperm meets the fascia of the egg, boom, we have light, right? So
Hmm.
for me, it's extremely primordial. And then we grow our fascia first, and then our cells and everything come in it. So if we can shift our view like that. So imagine we're growing our fascia and we also regrow it. Just like every other system of the body, we get new fascia. No one really knows the timeline. I'm going to say
Mm-hmm.
90 days because that's what I saw in my study. But I
Mm-hmm.
think of it like, have you ever seen, a spider innately knows how to grow a perfect web? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Give that spider caffeine, it's all over the
Yeah.
place, cut it. And it has a way of mending the web around it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that we grow and regrow our fascia as a total body, just like the spider's web, is being interfered with all types of things, including what you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or, sucking up dust or eating processed foods or, traumatic thoughts. Remember, fascia
Yeah.
is the number one proprioceptive reactionary system of the body. So it's reacting to everything inside the body and outside the body. So
Yeah.
I just look at it like we are spiders on cocaine and we are growing some crazy web on our inside. And these things that we do that are unnatural have an effect on it. And remember, like even if you're doing it on a face,
Mm-hmm.
it's quantum. It's sending the
Yeah.
message to the whole body.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go as far, me personally, to say it's damaging because I haven't like seen that in an ultrasound or something, but it is definitely something that we should be saying, let's be careful while we're, effing
I'll
with
send
this
you some
thing,
stuff.
basically.
I'll send you some stuff afterwards. You're
Oh,
gonna
you have
be.
some. Okay, well then let me tell you,
Oh yeah.
I am the quickest person to change my mind. Show me the evidence.
Cool. So and what's interesting is that you're talking at a very highly technical level, but it's very interesting, and like knowing your personal health journey, it's very interesting, especially overcoming childhood arthritis and near death experience. It's very interesting how that led you to discovering the fascia. So
Yeah, I'm an
maybe.
engineer by trade.
Mhm.
This was never anything that I intended to do, but when you put the little pieces of my life story together, it's like, oh, well, she's the perfect person.
Yeah.
It's almost like God used me as a human pincushion and it's like, okay, go figure this out.
Hmm.
Uh, and I've really devoted my entire career to it. And even when there's no camera on, there's nothing being developed, it's not work hours. Guess what I'm doing? I'm
Yeah.
talking to my neighbors about it. We're in the sauna using
Yeah.
fascia tools. It is 100% my life, my essence, my mission, and it's beautiful to watch because I am not closed-minded. And my understanding of it is continually evolving. And I'd say that we're, even at my level of knowledge, we are scratching the surface, just scratching the surface of
It's beautiful.
what this
So maybe walk
system can do.
walk me a little bit through your journey. How did you end up here?
So it really did start with being a child of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. That is what they said I had. I don't even know if I believe that anymore, but when you're a child, you just do what your parents tell you. So
Yeah.
I did everything from the anti-inflammatories at that time. I'm 53. So, we had a very rudimentary understanding of it. So I had gold shots, which I still have gold in my body on an x-ray. It
Wow.
looks like my skeleton's wearing jewelry. So I think that for me, I was just a kid that wanted to be a competitive gymnast, and I didn't like going to the doctor. I didn't like having my blood drawn or getting shots or
Hmm.
all of those things. So I just took it upon myself as a young child to start trying other things. And for me, even at 5 years old, I was like, I'm going to the Olympics. And I really resonated with athletes. So my parents let me get the Sports Illustrated magazine. And so whatever they did, I did. They did cold plunge, I did cold plunge. They did certain kind of stretching, eating raw eggs. But what it started to put together for me as a very young child was that, like, yes, your food is important. Like before a workout, after a workout, how do we recover?
Hmm.
And I started doing food charting. So I learned that, at an age where, first of all, no one would have thought about doing that. We were, you know, having snack wells. That was the big thing, so we're talking about the 70s.
Yeah.
So food charting and gluten and, the things that we are understanding now about the microbiome,
Hmm.
they just weren't That just wasn't public knowledge, but it really did help me. All I cared about was, am I going to have an arthritic flare up at the gymnastics meet on Saturday? So I started charting food,
Wow.
leading up to that. And definitely you see certain things that can throw you into a episode.
Yeah.
Maybe at the end of the day, I just had intolerance to fake food. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And I had hip dysplasia when I was born, and they put me in double diapers. So, oh
Wow.
no, I probably had a dislocated hip my whole childhood. So, was it arthritis? I have no idea. But it definitely led to whatever the doctors are telling me, I don't fully buy into it.
Yeah.
And I was able, by the time I was about 15, to not have symptoms anymore, and to
Wow.
be able to, when I would feel it coming on, the inflammation, or like my hip wouldn't want to be in socket, like I had my whole little routine to get out of
Hmm.
having symptoms. And so I think when that is your core belief system, you just carry that into adulthood.
Hmm.
And so when I get to college, I'm a gymnast. I'm on my dance team at, big school, Auburn University. And, that was my life. And I worked as a personal trainer because I had learned as a child that like exercise is part of the medicine, and stretching and all these things that like, now are very commonplace. And I was really lucky that at that time, there's a man named Bill Kazmaier
Hmm.
who invented strongman.
Hmm.
And so what we were doing, and we were just interested in how do we create this like superhuman strength. But what we were actually doing was learning how to leverage fascia.
Hmm.
So I had to kind of go back and pull that from my story, like, oh, like I was actually working with this a really, really long time ago when I was in college.
Yes,
And
for those
then
who don't know, he's the basically like the Michael Jordan of strong people, basically, Bill
right,
Cutman.
flipping tires, pulling
Yeah.
trains. Like I'm pretty sure he invented the sport. So how crazy is that,
Yeah.
that I would just happen to be
Yeah.
in Auburn, Alabama at the time of, one of the coolest
Yeah.
sports that's
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
So, and then from there, I really went and just became a mom, and got married. And so now we're kind of up into my late 20s. And this is really when everything changed in my life. And when I had my daughter, she's 26, just to kind of give us a time frame here, I got some kind of crazy infection. And it was inside the bone marrow. And it made, first of all, it ate my bones from the inside out.
Wow.
And then it began to seep and make me septic. And for people who don't know, once you are septic, you're pretty much
Yeah.
screwed. And I stroked out and died.
Wow.
And I had a full NDE that
Hmm.
was beautiful. I can tell everyone it's amazing when we die. But that's when I was really given a mission and a purpose. I was asked, did I want to cross over? And in that moment, you're in such bliss. Uh-oh, did
No.
you
No.
lose
No.
that sentence?
No. No.
Okay,
No.
good.
I I
You
I heard it. It's incredible. It's
it's
incredible
so
that you're
crazy.
in bliss and you're like, nah, I'm gonna go back. I have some unfinished
No,
business.
imagine you have two children, but I have to tell you, there's some, when we exit our body and we become a pure soul, we're just a soul, reuniting with source and others and the collective, whatever, religious you
Hmm.
want to put around that. It's so intoxicating that, you really do, you're ready to
Hmm.
leave that behind. And so, I'll tell it in a funny way. They were basically like, so you ready to come in here? And I'm like, yeah, let's get this popping. And they were like, nope, that's not happening.
Psych.
And psych. Yeah. And so what I heard, the actual words that I heard was that it wasn't my time, and that I needed to go back
Hmm.
because I had something very important to do, and that I would be given the knowledge when the time was right.
Hmm.
First thing I said to my father when I came out of the coma was, you're not going to believe this. Jesus told me
Wow.
this, X, Y, and Z. So,
Uh-huh.
obviously that becomes something life changing. And then I don't know, I think ever since then, and I think most people who've had NDEs will tell you this, you're just so much more intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get the little hairs on the back, and when you know you're on the right path, you just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very hard to describe to someone that's not, you know, super intuitive.
Yeah.
But there's been several times throughout my life since then, one of which was that dissection. I was like, oh, this is it. This is how I'm going to heal myself. Because not only did I stroke out and die, I lost like 80% of the density of my femur. I have a prosthetic custom pelvis and hip replacement, definitely not something that matches with my lifestyle now of
Yeah.
being a 53-year-old surfer,
Mm-hmm.
doing one of the hardest sports on the
Yeah.
planet. Um, but I've had downloads throughout the years that have kind of helped me along the way. And I do feel like that my career has been somewhat cloaked, in some protection. And I think that, whether I had a company or not is irrelevant. I'm going to get this message out there, and I'm going to keep learning and keep studying and keep talking.
Yeah. And then, when was it that you had limitation in the like? How did you come out and understand that the fascia is really what you want to focus on?
So coming out and being crippled, and my whole body was sort of impacted on this right side. So imagine a fractured femur up
Mm-hmm.
in the pelvis, up in the ribs.
Mm-hmm.
So the limp itself was very painful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was studying like in my mind, I was like, how do I strengthen the hip? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, and stretch it. I didn't really understand anything beyond that. And then after I took that dissection course, and I was taking it specifically to be like, I want to physically see what is here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to use my little engineering brain to try to figure out some way to fix myself. And one of the things that they were talking about in the dissection course is that fascia is sticky. It's the only sticky thing. And I'm like, that's it. I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stuck in this position.
Yeah.
So that's when I started saying, well, how do you get unstuck?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I began to use my hands, kitchen tools, anyone that would stand on me, stretch me, poke me, and I started to understand from there. Went to China. I started to learn about meridians, which is the same thing as fascial lines. And I kind of put together that, if I work on my foot and my opposite shoulder through these lines, I can actually unstuck
Wow.
that right side. And that's exactly what happened. And then I already knew how to strengthen it. So here I am being given a wheelchair and a life of pain management, and a year later, I'm as active as I had ever been,
Wow.
So it was definitely one of those things where people were like, whoa.
So how do you, from having like many things done to you, poke me, stretch me, etc., how do you come out on the other side and say, hey, something like the FasciaBlaster is the product that I need, is the tool that I
Oh,
need?
wow. That was such a long journey. I'll condense it. Like I said, I really did use uh, like tools that I built in my
Yeah.
garage, kitchen tools, things that had grippers, but what I had learned was how to see the body three-dimensional. So I went to a chiropractor in my town who was trying to help me. And here I come bebopping in a few months later, and he's like, what the hell? And I was like, well, I'll show you what I did. So I did it to him. And he was like, you you have to do this to my patients. And he
Wow.
immediately gave me Olympic track athletes because he was already in that field. And injured Olympic track athletes were getting their best scores like
Wow.
within weeks. And that's when we were like, wow, we're really doing something here, you know? And it took a while. I wrote about it in my life story in my book that, like, of course you feel like you have imposter syndrome. I went from being crippled to sort of inventing this. I'm not even going to call it a methodology. It's just an understanding of the
Mm-hmm.
body to where to go to fix it or
Mm-hmm.
unstick it. And, within 2 years, I've got some of the most famous professional athletes flying in from all over the country to come and see me. And of course, I'm like, don't you have like, a team
Mm-hmm.
doctor, trainer, but the reality is that this was just my place in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when we finally step into our essence and align with our true self, that's when things really happen. And so that's how the career took off. It took off in a clinical situation with professional athletes, but we were finding that the knuckles, all these different pulling methods, drumsticks, things like that. That is what we were using to open the fascia. And you can imagine, I'm like a 5'2", 140-pound girl. And for whatever reason, I had a bunch of small girls who I had trained, and we're treating the NFL. So we're like, this is exhausting. We really have got to find a way to either create a tool or find a tool that helps us leverage so that we can sort of open the fascia in a quicker way, so that then we can get into the structures and the mobilizations and all the really cool stuff that we were doing.
Yeah.
And of course, I've had luckily there wasn't a tool, or
Yeah.
I would have never invented it. So I was really trying to simulate knuckles and leverage. And a guy who he had all of his lymph nodes removed from
Wow.
stage 4 cancer, and we were helping him. And he did manufacturing, and he's like, "I'd love to help you create
Wow.
something. Like, I'd love to have it." And so we created the first one, and it worked mind-blowingly better than we could have ever imagined.
So that's crazy. Is
Isn't that a
that
crazy story? It's
yeah?
a fun story.
So is that how you would explain? Like, let's say someone could not, you won't be able to show them a device like a fascia blaster. Is that how you would explain it? It's knuckles and leverage.
Yes. So here is the fascia blaster,
Uh-huh.
just in case your audience has never seen it. Okay. So we invented it thinking, oh, it's knuckles,
Hmm.
But now, after millions of dollars of research, I think the thing that we want to look to in science to say, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just like breaking up an adhesion or whatever. What we saw is that, just like the spider web, that fascia can completely remodel.
Hmm.
Okay. So this means you go from shit fascia, being honest,
Hmm.
to baby fascia using this tool.
Hmm.
So then the question becomes, okay, why? So there's a couple of things. Number one, there's really no other device that has the prongs that go down in.
Hmm.
There's tiger tails and, wood therapy and but basically anything that rolls,
Hmm.
it does not penetrate down into the fibers of the muscle tissues.
Hmm.
And what we already know about fascia is that it surrounds every single muscle fiber, and it looks almost like a fiber optic cable
Yeah.
because it functions like a fiber optic cable.
Hmm.
So when you have these various little prongs, that can actually go down into the tissue, then you're exciting the fascia in its depths rather than mashing on it. You're
Hmm.
like literally scrubbing it.
Yeah.
Um, and then the second piece, and I think anyone out there who does therapy or beauty or any type of tool or massage, what we have to, this is new research that came out in 2018, is that we used to think that the matrix, the fascial matrix, was produced and regenerated through fibroblasts.
Hmm.
But in 2018, Dr. Stecco came out and said, hey, guess what, everybody? The fibroblast is what creates, I'm just going to call it more like the matter.
Hmm.
Okay. So, like, that's your collagen,
Yeah.
that's your ground substance, right? Your GAX. But the fasciocyte, and they invented a new name for a new cell, it's what produces hyaluronic
Yeah.
acid. So, what's so important about these two is if you need both to actually regenerate this matrix, they are regenerated in different ways. Okay. So we have this thing over here, the fibroblast, that responds to pressure
Hmm.
and it responds to stretch.
Hmm.
And then oh, this really new exciting cell, it responds to shear.
Hmm.
So if you're not doing all three, and so when I started looking at my tool, I'm like, it does all of that. It presses in, so that's your pressure. When you slide it this way, it pulls, from a fixed point and you get the stretch. And then with the claws going in between those fibers, guess what you're getting?
Hmm.
Shear.
Yeah.
So I did not design it that way, but that is my very best guess at why this has so much more of a dramatic result than, say, a gua sha or massage or a roller or something, because we're actually hitting on those things.
And
So,
that of course relates to the beautiful result you get on people's skin, or that expresses in people's skin, because we are kind of hitting all the targets of what skin should be doing, or skin and obviously the tissue underneath should be doing.
I mean, I think of it so simply as like, if this is the light and energy system of the body, we just need to palpate it the right way. And then it does its thing.
Yeah.
It makes everything else better. But what I find when I go to the press, particularly beauty, every beauty editor on the planet will be like, yeah, it's great. It produces collagen. Okay. Do we all know what that actually means?
Yeah.
Right? Producing collagen means that you're speeding up the time of the fascia remodeling,
Hmm.
right? Because fascia is collagen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's over 90% collagen. I don't actually think that we know, because it's constantly moving. So we can't really, nail it down and be like, it's exactly this. But
Hmm.
when people talk about collagen, they are talking about the fascia. And so when we have collagen production, we're talking about being able to regenerate it quicker. And that literally is the difference between older skin and youthful skin. And
And
we see this backed up with stem cells and blood and
yeah.
everything else. I mean, we could dive into any of that dorky stuff
Yes.
that you want.
Yeah, actually, that was my next question. But you mentioned, speeding up the generation or regeneration of collagen. But I think really, really important. It's really, really important to stop and understand the difference between, aged collagen, because our problem as we grow older isn't only necessarily the inability to generate enough collagen. It is the inability to generate collagen and mobility. The collagen needs to be mobile. So, going back to devices that we kind of recommend not doing, or really any experience of an injury like you had, it wasn't the inability to create collagen per se. It is the collagen that was created it was sticky, it was not mobile. And that is really at the root of aging.
Yep. It's so crazy. Oh, I mean, wow, I have so many things that I want to say. So yes, what you said was so beautiful about fascia, how it's a scorecard,
Hmm.
right? So it really is important. I mean, the minute that we scar down or we start creating thicker or drier fascia, and again, going back to what makes it glide is the hyaluronic acid.
Hmm.
So like that shearing of the tissue is super important. And I don't think anybody's really jumped on that besides me yet.
So
Um,
I did tell you about this one article that is very esoteric, that looked at the coding of elastin fibers.
Interesting.
And that coding, as we again, if it's in a youthful state, it provides gliding. It's also the it is basically water loving, okay, hydrophilic. And when we get older, injury happens, rigidity happens, immobility happens. The tips of that material shift,
Yep,
and it becomes water hating or water fearing, hydrophobic.
that's
And
right.
that creates actually that stickiness that we alluded to before. And again, like, there's another way of looking at it, really, is like reforming that function to a gliding rather than sticky function.
Absolutely. It's that. And then the other thing that I have think is so interesting, and I had to sort of weave the studies together. But, I bet a lot of your viewers are in perimenopause or
Mm-hmm.
menopause or postmenopausal.
Mm-hmm.
So we now know that, so fascia is made of different types of collagen, right? Like it's this kind of the stiffer to the softer, to
Yeah.
make it really simple. And guess what happens when we're low estrogen, whether it's our cycle or, old like me?
Yeah. You can't make the softer
We
one.
produce
Yeah.
stiffer collagen. So we're getting it from every single angle, that we're producing the stiffer, collagen. We're having water, repellent. So I mean, all I can say is for myself, and I do use my tools with those three mechanisms on my face, my neck, my whole body. And I never even knew it had anything to do with the face until
Yeah.
about 7 years ago or 8 years ago, when people just started taking my tools to their face. I was like, what are you doing? But yeah, looking at my photographs, I am literally turning back the hands of time. And back then I was doing Botox and filler and, all the stuff that people in LA do. And, yeah, I just think it's crazy, because when we think about, like, how do we have amazing skin? Like, what would be your top things you would say? Like, if we want good skin, we need
Probably.
blip, 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 blip.
Yeah. You probably sleep, movement, and nutrition.
I'm so on board with that.
Yeah.
I'm so on board that, because sleep, if we think of fascia, I mean, fascia relates to all of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's the reactionary system. So if we are dog tired, what do you think the fascia is going to do?
Yeah.
It's going to be like, oh, let me protect.
Mm-hmm.
If we eat crappy food, just like the spider on caffeine,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So I just think they're all intricately linked. And I would add blood flow
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that skin.
That's the
And
movement part. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
yeah, that is the movement part, because that's the other thing when we talk about shearing. And I think this is why we have so many fascia movement therapists. They do get shearing. You do get shearing when
Yeah. Yeah.
when you are doing good full body movement, breath work, all of these things. But I think one thing I like to say about the actual blood, because we say that it feeds the cells, it brings oxygen to the cells,
Mm-hmm.
elast and all this, but we have 34 trillion cells.
Mm-hmm.
How many capillaries do we have?
Yeah.
Less than a billion.
Yeah.
So how does that math work? How does capillaries feed trillions of cells when there's only billions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's because the pump for the body is this massive jello sponge that sucks that blood up, sifts it, and puts it right back in. So if you have, traffic on the highway, so to speak, or the scar tissue that you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about, or the immobility, guess what? That sponge is not going to feed those cells,
Yes.
and we've seen this on the reverse side, where people have thicker fascia, cancer grows.
Yeah.
So I think we can, kind of make a little intellectual leap over here, that of course it's micro deaths, and we can't separate the blood and the fascia.
Listen,
They are the same thing.
you're raising too many good points. So I will say, just to before I because I do want to talk about like blood flow a little bit more, and stem cells, before we move on. But I would say that, as an anecdote, and longevity science, the way that people view it right now, and obviously it seems like it's been here forever, because it's a maybe 20, 30-year-old robustly. That's when research has been going on, but really it started as anecdotes from cancer research, from the
Mm-hmm.
oncological studies. Anything from our hallmarks of aging to, whatever you want to think of as far as like how we preserve longevity or youthful function, actually started by how do we deal with cancer, or how do we stave off cancer, how do we deal with cancer, how do we make sure cancer doesn't come back, etc. So I agree with you, but I would want to ask you, how does, talking about like the skin, blood flow, how does that relate to promoting more blood coming into the skin, as far as like fascia is concerned? And then how does it relate to promoting the proliferation of stem cells to where we need them for repair, for example, the skin?
I love this question. Thank you so much for asking it. So, I think when we think about blood, where does blood come from?
Yeah.
It comes from deep inside the body up to the skin,
Hmm.
right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
And there was some great research that came out of actually Shiseido.
Hmm.
Give them some props.
Yeah.
They have some 4D imaging now. And I can tell you, if you look at a 20-year-old skin and a 50-year-old skin, the blood, the total difference is that, so you have all these fascial layers, fat layers, all this coming up to the skin. A 20-year-old, like a champion, those capillaries are right there at the surface,
Yeah.
right? Look at a 50-year-old, they're all not reaching the skin.
Receded. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, when we talk about fascia, what could potentially block the capillaries and their growth?
Hmm.
The fascia. It's the only thing that could really block them.
Hmm.
So even in the design of my face tools, I use the tools first that really get the blood flowing at a deeper level, and then we end up with like a silicone scrubber to try to pull the blood. Like, you want to be red AF,
Hmm.
right? And my theory is that we're able to get those capillaries back up to the skin.
Yeah, I think
You know,
mechanical stimulation is definitely, which is what you're doing. You're just able to do it at many levels. Is definitely the way that our body has been hardwired to that is the stimulation that your body is hardwired to respond to. So
that's
again,
right.
going to kind of novel science, trying to poke things and create uh, to bypass certain levels of the body and only like target a specific tissue
Right.
doesn't that the reason that works, that the reason you're going two steps forward one step back is because that's not what you're evolved to deal with to begin with. Whereas mechanical pressure, bumps and bruises and things like that, and obviously like mimicking them, not actually having them, is the way that our body responds uh
Mechanical
to
stress.
stimuli. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it
Stimuli.
makes perfect
No, and
sense.
I would even go further. I don't know, you look at research like I do. We're complete nerds. But if you really look at, I feel like this came out of Asia. It won a Congress award, but basically they started saying that, around the sebaceous gland, right? So
Hmm.
like where our hair inserts, by the way, into a big old sea of fascia,
Hmm.
um, that there are stem cell reservoirs where our stem cells sort of hang out by the
Yes,
hair.
yes.
But when you apply mechanical pressure, guess what happens? They release into, they say the skin, but I would argue they release into the fascia.
Hmm.
And then, then what happens? The reservoirs fill back up. The reservoirs fill back up. We don't have the technology to study that yet, but I would be willing to, I don't know, I'd throw some money down to say that as those stem cells regenerate, if they're regenerating quicker, that those stem cells are going to behave younger and younger.
Yeah.
So I just think it's so interesting because it's not like this concept is new. People are using that plasma pen and poking through several layers of fascia. They'll even tell you, we want to get to the deep fascial planes, and then pouring exosomes and things into them. I tried that when we were at the biohacking conference. I don't know if it did anything, but what I would argue is that you could do that with the FasciaBlaster or some kind of similar tool. I don't understand why face tools haven't come further. Like everybody is doing gua sha, but that is only, that's moving lymph, and maybe that first layer of fascia is getting a stretch or something like that, but we're not getting into the layers where it matters.
Yeah, I think maybe facial yoga and kind of pinching and moving, or
Mm-hmm.
even gua sha, might be beneficial to a certain level. But I agree that we're just moving away from this as a focus of regenerative medicine, or we're trying to refine signals or whatever, and really we're not looking at kind of holistic tools at all.
I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, that's probably because, people normally want to invent things to monetize,
Yeah.
and if you look at, my tools for, the face tools are like $60 or something like
Yeah.
that. And I have patents on the way that they're shaped. I can understand why people would go in this direction, but
Yeah.
I do feel like I do feel like we're supposed to live to be 230 years old, like the people in the Bible. I personally moved to a blue zone, which is where people live healthfully over 100. I live here in Costa Rica, and I can tell you these people are not at the Medi Spa doing plasma pens.
Yeah.
These are the people who don't have windows on their doors and they have no stress. They sleep, they have their families around them, they socialize all day long, they eat out of their garden, they live on the beach, and I just feel like we should be going in that direction when we look towards longevity and also even our skin. Do you know that I went way up on the mountain and these guys had like deer lard all over their face, like grown men. And I was like, okay, I just feel like, at the end of the day, I'm that person. I feel like God put it all here
Yeah.
for us. And we just have to put our body in the best possible environment to let it do its thing.
Yeah.
And modern life is terrible. It's terrible for our skin. It's terrible for our joints. It's
Yeah.
terrible for everything. There are some amazing advancements. Like I'm so grateful for my pelvis that I wouldn't have
Yeah.
had, 200 years ago. But these basic things, like you said, like sleep, de-stressing, hydrated, being mineralized, and to me, the Fascia Blaster is just an extension of massage. It's
Yeah.
just a more
Well,
refined
I
natural massage.
let me push back on that because I think it is definitely an extension of massage, but the thing is the per, per, how often you can do it,
Mhm.
because because an extension of a massage would mean that you might conform to the instances where like the cadence that normally people get massages at, unless you're like some Japanese overlord in the
Bob Hope and you
1500s.
get a
Oh
a
yeah.
massage.
but
Yeah.
but m- to connect to what you said before about mechanical pressure kind of promoting anything from blood flow to stem cell proliferation. Actually, most studies have been done on even on bone tissue, showing that mechanical pressure improves anything from like obviously like improved bone health to releasing of stem cells not only outward but also inward. And there is something to say there about beauty as and longevity of skin and facial appearance as time goes on, because the thinning of the bone is a major factor in that. So I think we're taking
Ugh,
care. Yeah.
now you're, like, getting into my passions.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have much less bone density because I lost it.
Yeah.
We can regrow it. And what I found in my study, and I'm happy to give you the,
Yeah.
some B-roll that you can insert in there, is that I we saw like tissue. It's not just like, oh, it's thick or scarred. It's that it's unorganized in the
Hmm.
before ultrasounds. Like fascia is supposed to have layers, like literal layers through the body. And then it's also intermuscular and it's also down to the deepest level. It is what wraps the bone and what feeds the bone.
Hmm.
And I cannot tell you how many ultrasounds that we saw where there was no fascia ring on the femur bone. And then in the after, oh, it appeared,
Yeah.
and we can't use the fascia blaster to the bone. So that is the body's ability to generate that spider web. But I would argue that having healthy fascia has an impact on literally everything.
Yeah.
literally everything, because it is that light system. It is the soft tissue that permeates. It's the quantum system. It's a feeding system. So of course it impacts
I
bones.
love
Of
it.
course it impacts liver. Of course it impacts gut, which is all 100% lined in
Yeah.
fascia.
Wow. I
You
love
know?
what you're saying. I love it. We're getting close to an hour recording, and
No.
I don't want to leave this conversation without talking about the emotional aspect,
Mm,
um, because I think this is where at least I was introduced to fascia as a player who was holding on to emotions, or being a conduit for different things that are going on in your subconscious. And maybe we should start by, like, let me ask you a question. How prevalent is your experience with people when they're starting to work on their fascia that emotions come up?
probably half.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, half of people. I mean, I have recorded tracks for people to use my tools while going through, like, releasing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's the physical and there's the metaphysical. So if we think about these tissues, we know 100% tissues can trap stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, we had a woman who hadn't had a cigarette in 20 years, used the FasciaBlaster, and her grandkids were like, Nana,
Wow.
why do we smell smoke? Right. And we've had
Wow.
all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. So bridge that over here a little bit. We know, again, it is the primary sensory organ for the body. So if we just think about it, like, if I was going to scream at you, what would you do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in the fascia, is that it retracts. Now, that's a very third dimensional view of it. My more fifth dimensional view of it is that, as above, so below. You got to understand quantum universe and kind of buy into that. But I think the memory's in the water.
Yeah.
And, I think when we talk about that beautiful fascia matrix that's lined in those fractal crystals holding the water, I think it's that literal. I mean, I can tell you from my own personal experience, without making any kind of a claim, when I was touching human bodies, and again, I'm very intuitive, sometimes I could actually see people's memories.
Wow.
So I think that it can transfer energetically outside of the fascia into my fascia, or just energetically in general. Um, we definitely, I mean, if you follow people like Human Garage that works with fascia, or come to any of my academies, like, we literally see people sob. We have somebody literally have a full meltdown every single training.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so fun for me now, because I'm really in the whole plant medicine woo-woo community down here, I've had shamans come and take the course, and they're incorporating actually using FasciaBlaster tools in ceremony to help with the release. Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy?
it's pretty
I'm
crazy.
telling you, this is the blend of worlds that we need, that
Mm-hmm.
we're onto it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's incredible, and I mean, that's why a lot of the times when we talk about Botox, for example, to be completely fair, we poo-poo Botox so much. It's important to say I'm not necessarily against it. I'm not necessarily against anything that would make a person feel better about themselves. I think that's the number one goal. So
Correct.
a lot of the times when I do talk about Botox, I say, hey, here are the negative things. And one of the ways that you could do still Botox, but you could negate some of those negative things, is make sure you have mechanical stimulation, mechanical movement, that you are engaging, and you're initiating with your tissue. You can time it. You don't want to do it exactly after Botox. That's how you get it um, into your adrenals, and that's like not the best thing in the world. But you want to do it towards like the middle and end stages um, of your Botox, so after like a month, up to like 3 months. So, and that's kind of why we're saying it, is because the movement is is essential not only for skin health but for, fascia and all of that, past the second dimensional aspect
Right.
of your being, of your body.
Yeah. I mean, again, for me, I feel like there's personal choice. Like at the end of the day, I had a breast reduction. Having your fascia cut is like the worst thing that you can do for it.
Yeah.
But I had to look at my risk benefit, and I also know how to regenerate my scar tissue.
Yeah.
And I'm still on that path. This was over 2.5 years ago. But guess what I still do? I blast my scars. I'm getting there. I'm getting the movement. I cup them.
Yeah.
And do all of that. So I feel like when we do something that we know is, I hate to use the D word, damaging, but interruptive.
Yeah.
Call it that,
Yeah.
right? Then knowing how to sort of counterbalance that, I think is super important, and I'm on the same bandwagon with you. I think people, we do need to feel good about the way we look and feel like we're, doing all the things that we can. But what I do find is that, people don't want to address their sleep. They are like, I'm going to keep stimulating myself with 9 cups of coffee. I'm going to, keep working 10, 15 hours a day and give me the Botox,
Let me tell
which
you
I'm not a
something.
real big fan of that.
I'm sure that there are people that go to your shaman and say, "Hey, I thought we're gonna do,
Fix
only."
me.
Oh yeah, that you're only going to fix me, and you're giving me a tool that I now need to use physically. Like, I'm sure that
Yes.
occurs as well. That's what's crazy. Like, as humans, we want to do the bare minimum to get the result that we're aiming for, and that's the most human thing there is. And I think my role, your role, people that really care about, something deeper than the visual result, is that our responsibility is to maybe raise the bar of what is the minimal minimal thing to
What is
do.
the minimum?
Yeah. So
You can imagine in my social media, I get, oh yeah, you just do whatever you want and you fascia blast and you're going to look amazing. And I'm like, no, I don't know how you heard that message. But like I do everything to be healthy.
Yeah.
And what I like about fascia blasting is it doesn't just make you look better. It actually makes you better.
Actually, one of the things that you did, which is to me, as an immigrant, as someone who took their things and moved, and once every 2 years, apparently we keep moving from place to place. I think, I mean, one of the things that you've done, and really not to get into it because I have a different question, but I just want to mention it. Like, one of the things that you've done, which you say, like, I do everything. You literally like said, "Hey, this is where I want to live. This is where I feel like I'm energetically, more aligned
yeah.
or whole," and you moved there. And I mean, when you moved to Costa Rica, it wasn't the Costa Rica that people think of now. So, like, it's pretty crazy. But I have a question to finish. It's actually, an interest of mine. You mentioned in the beginning of the interview that you are now more of a seminal part of the fascia world congress type, like, ecosystem. So
Yeah, it's so amazing. So I'm going to be the key sponsor and one of the lead speakers at the Global Fascia Congress. And there's amazing fascia scientists. I've studied their work. Carla Stecco, I just talked about with the fascia site. She's a member. She's going to be at the conference. So for me, these are my heroes, but they've kind of been out on an island.
Yeah.
And their research isn't really getting to mainstream research. And even if it gets to mainstream research, it's not getting to customers, which is ultimately what we want. And it's like, I felt like I've got 10 million people that follow me. They're interested in fascia. So like, why don't we try to bridge that gap? And it was great because they reached out to me. And then once we started talking, it was like we were completely aligned on our thought that like it's happening. We're getting to a tipping point. We're having conversations like this. This podcast would have not happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So starting to like bring that together, and other fascia people and plastic surgeons and beauty people, and getting us all like to where we have an entity that we can go to and say, okay, we trust this information.
Yeah.
Like that's huge.
So
So I'm really excited to present my research, which by the way, my research is not the end all be all of research on fascia, but it's the first time we've been able to really see it in
yeah,
ultrasounds and see it regenerate. And it actually, people
and you're
thought
a
it took
bridge off the
100.
island, but
Yeah,
really,
it gets me off the island, it gets them off the island, and my goal in this partnership would be to just take good, accurate base science that of course we need to do way more research,
yeah,
but put it in the hands of the public. So I've even
yes,
invited my audience to come to this 4 or 5 day seminar, when normally it's for,
yeah,
therapists or people that do it for a living. But I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
why
yeah,
hold that information? Like, we should all know. And it's sad. We could jump into this, but this is biohacking, so I feel like real science and things that make sense, like regenerating your fascia is as regenerative medicine as you can get,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so I think it's a great partnership, and I think it's great to, on a world stage, put it out there as like, hey, this is an alternative to some of the noise that's in the biohacking
Or
space.
at least a prerequisite. You could do whatever you want. Again, if you want to run your water through pebbles because you think it structures them, do it. Do it. Okay. But as the comments on Instagram get wrong, it doesn't replace mechanical shearing and pressure and movement. It doesn't. So, I mean, I think we've
Yeah,
met.
you can structure your water all you want. You
You
can
can do it.
even get your
Yeah.
Kangen and whatever you're going to do, which, I have all of that well water. It's crazy here. But, at the end of the day, it is those three mechanisms: shear, stretch, and pressure,
Yeah.
that is required
Yeah.
in order to stimulate,
Yeah.
to actively stimulate your fibroblast and your fascial
I,
site, which is what remodels the soft tissue.
I
So
love it.
that's what, when somebody says, what about massage? And I'm like, well, how are they doing it?
Yeah.
And then what about lymphatic drainage? What about cupping? And it's like, okay, you analyze it. What does
Mm-hmm.
cupping do?
Mm-hmm.
Stretch. Does
Yeah.
it do anything else? Does it shear? Not really. Does it provide pressure? No. Okay. So there you go. I'm not saying don't do it. It's great to stretch your fascia. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, if the goal is to regenerate your fascia or speed up the proliferation, that ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
And neither is a good massage once a week. I'm sorry, but I always
Exactly.
say, brush your teeth, brush your hair, brush your fascia,
Yeah.
because it requires, and that for me is probably the thing that I'm most proud of. We were talking about this a little bit offline. I don't need any more money. I don't need to sell FasciaBlasters. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what you do at home daily. And that's what we see. Like, somebody goes to a great therapist, do it. I have a therapist that works on me twice a week. I am not saying don't do it. I am saying it's like the dentist. Get your deep cleaning, but you still need to brush your teeth,
Exactly.
and it's the same thing with fascia care. And there's all kinds of ways to care for fascia. Fascia blasting just happens to be a very good way to do it. But you're stretching,
Yeah.
your yoga classes, your movement, your multi-plane movement,
Yeah.
and
Lifting weights,
particularly as we
everything.
get older, because we're fighting the clock of
Yeah.
the actual substances our fascia is made of.
Yeah. Listen, Ashley, I love you. I love what you're doing. You are such an inspiration. It's such an honor to have you on the podcast.
Oh,
I'm
I have been
so
waiting this since the day we met.
yeah, and
I was
I
like, they really have it going on. And I also want to say something briefly, because
yeah.
I have been using your products, which of course I had to go head first into all the science, but they have really made a difference in like the surface of my skin.
Amazing.
So hats off to Young Goose. And it's funny, you told me, because I'm one of those people that's like, I'm not going to do like a morning and this is how we do the, in the night. So I literally just at night put it all on.
Mm-hmm.
and it's still working. So even doing it, we'll just say half-ass, it still works. I'm so in the morning, I'm like, I have a one-track mind for surfing.
I love it.
Not.
I love it. And you know what, as again, as we keep saying over and over again, the idea is not to like, to strong arm a person out of their life's purpose, or even interest or view of how they should live their life. The idea is to cover the bases, so so they get to eat the cake and have it too, or the vice versa. Anyway, Ashley,
I love that.
we're gonna bug you, and we're gonna do more things in the future, because I think you are a really force of nature, and quite literally. And
I
we
totally
yeah,
appreciate that. And I'm here for it. I
amen,
think, sharing audiences with like-minded people is the it's the old school way of like passing
amen, amen.
the telephone game. And I would love to have you on my podcast and talk about everything that
Let's do it.
about all these amazing, I'm just going to call it substances that
Yeah.
we can do to enhance our beauty. So anyway, thank you so much. What a wonderful way to spend the morning.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And Ashley, so before we go, where could people consume the Ashley Black content, Fascia Blaster,
I mean, I
etc.?
would rather people just follow me, The Real Ashley Black. That's my Instagram handle. There's a website, The Real Ashley Black, because I do a lot more than the products. I do
Yeah,
definitely public speaking. I have
yeah.
books that I've written about this, and then I'm just pumping out content every single day as I get it, so it's almost like you got to be live with it, but it's just the REAL Ashley, ASHLEY, and then black, like the color.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you can jump off to the websites, the blogs. I have a app, the Fascia app. I've got a new mechanical tool coming out that I think is going to change the game. So just get plugged in and pop your popcorn, baby.
Amen. All right. Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you, everyone.
Namaste.
Namaste.